Good day to everyone today. I'm Kathy Mendel, and we have the great privilege today to visit with an extraordinary woman, and that would be Dr. Jennifer Keene Dawes. And I met Jennifer, about 2 years ago now, Jennifer?
Yes,
Has it been that long? Oh my
I
goodness.
know.
Yeah. And in the process of working together, I was able to learn about Jennifer's story of her life. And I was so overwhelmed and so impressed by the journey that Jennifer has experienced in where she started, what she's doing now, and how it goes. I wanted you to hear her story. So today we get the opportunity to visit with Jennifer. So Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you, Kathy.
And
Thank you so much.
yes, now, so first, I'd like to just introduce you to where you are today. Tell us about the career that you have had in the education field, and then we're going to go back and we're going to talk about how all of this unfolded. So,
Oh,
why don't you take it from there? Tell us about your career.
okay. Well, thank you so much for having me, Kathy, and for giving me an opportunity to share my story with others. So, I am a professor of human communication studies at the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. But prior to that, I served for several years in administration. My most recent post was as the Dean of the Graduate School at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. And so UMES, as we're popularly known, is a constituent institution of the University System of Maryland. We are
Mhm.
located on the eastern end of Maryland's Eastern Shore, and we are the state's research university in this region. So I served at UMES for 9 years as the graduate dean, and I was responsible for the graduate programs, PhD programs in toxicology, environmental science, and programs in the humanities, as well as master's programs. And when I started, I had a mandate from the former president to work to move the institution from a master's focused to a doctoral research university. And so that took us quite a while, but we accomplished that. And that's why we are now the research institution. So, having served there for 9 years, I also served as the interim provost and vice president for academic affairs. And in that role, I was able to work with the deans and to manage academic affairs for that time. I also served as a reviewer for the National Science Foundation when they had, panels to look at submissions, particularly in historically Black institutions. I was also a member of the committee, a committee from the GRE board. So the GRE, as you already know, deals with the examinations that international students and other students have to take prior to admission to graduate school. I was also the president of the nation's Council of Historically Black Graduate Schools, and I served in that capacity for 5 years. And I did a number of other things in administration, some of which I can hardly remember. I think I might have been serving for perhaps close to 30 years doing what I'd like to do. But about 5 years ago, I went back to faculty. And so at the UMES, where I now am a senior tenured professor in the Department of English and Modern Languages, I teach human communication studies. I teach the speech classes. I'm trying to help the department develop programs, and I take students abroad. So last year, I took my first cohort of students to Scandinavia. We went to Germany, Denmark, and Sweden, and the students were able to research the Scandinavian culture and prepare speeches on what they had observed and deliver those speeches at the Danish Institute for International Studies. So I am at a place now in my career where I can look back and say, I've been able with the people I've worked with been able to accomplish a lot in higher education.
Yeah, when Jennifer and I met, she had questions about, retirement, and obviously Thea Financial. I mean, we
Yeah.
help accomplished women
Yes.
transition their savings into a reliable income, and that was a big gap in your area of expertise, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes. So I was very happy when one morning I was getting ready for church, and the TV was on, and there was this lady, and there she was. She was talking about retirement opportunities for women. And because I'm close to retirement, I turned around and I said, "What? Let me talk to her and see if she can help me." Because
Yeah,
I've worked for so long, but I've not paid full attention to what I really need to do for retirement. I mean, like I save in, have some accounts here and there, but to also put it together and have it streamlined, I needed an expert. And so thank you for dropping into my life, Kathy, at a point when I needed someone to sort of take the reins and help me
yeah.
to manage.
Well, I feel the same way. I feel like you coming into my life has made a difference. You're on my mind a lot, Jennifer,
Oh,
because the beauty of what we do as a virtual company, we get to meet the most extraordinary women around the world, around the country, especially.
yeah.
And when I met Jennifer, I just want to tell you that from a professional point of view, just listening to her, just her gentle demeanor. She's not pompous or bragging about her life, but she has a lot to brag about. But I'll tell you what happened was we were talking one day, and I love your accent, and it's such a beautiful accent. And I asked her the question, "Tell me your story." And Jennifer began to tell me her story, and I was overwhelmed because
Mm,
we look at people's lives. We intersect with people, don't we? In just a moment of time. You're here, I'm there, we're talking about retirement, we're
yes.
figuring out how you're going to have a comfortable and relaxed, stress-free financial retirement, and we get into that, but then we learn about the circumstances that led you to where you are. And that is one of the
Yes.
subjects that I really wanted to share with our listeners today is your story because it is so inspiring to me. Now, just for those of you listening today, you will enjoy this, but I want you to know that Jennifer has a book. It's called The Miracles in the Valley: Out of Darkness into Marvelous Light. And she was so kind to share that book with me. And I want you to know that when the book came, I put it in, I have a place in my house that I do all my reading. I set it there. And one evening I picked it up and I wanted to learn more about Jennifer. And I started reading the book. I did not put it down until I finished. I cried, I laughed, and I will tell you that I want you to have this book. And so at the end of the podcast, down at the bottom of the screen will be a place for you to order it from Amazon. And I'm telling you, you need to order it. It's not a huge long read, it's not 500 pages, but it is captivating and it's beautiful. And I want you to do that. So I'm just encouraging you. We'll talk about that again before we end today. So, Jennifer, I want you to take us back
Yes.
to Jamaica. Tell us the story of how you ended up in the United States, the circumstances around that, and the provisions and the way that life unfolded for you in those early years before your academic career took off and what led you to that.
Yes. Well, thank you again, Kathy. So, in Jamaica, I was working as a journalist, and I worked as a journalist for many years. And at one point, I was the chief information officer for the government of Jamaica. And
Hmm.
so I had what people would call a good life. I had a very good life back home in Jamaica because at that time I was just focused on my career. I had absolutely no intention of leaving Jamaica to go anywhere because I loved my life in Jamaica. I loved what I was doing. And then I got married. And back in Jamaica, there is, I'm not sure if that happens here as well, but back in Jamaica, if you are unmarried and you are of a certain age, people frown on that. They look at you as if, okay, so what's wrong with you? How come you're not married yet? But I met and fell in love with what I thought, or who I thought was a wonderful young man, wonderful young man. And so we got married, and the marriage lasted for almost a decade. But I was still busy with my life, busy with doing what I was doing. And I never paid attention to finance. I never paid attention to money because I trusted my husband. He was an accountant and I was in public relations at that time. And so we had a joint account, and whatever monies we had, we would put it in there. And we also opened a grocery store. And I remember that we had gotten a loan for $65,000 to furnish that mini mart. But we had made provisions for that money to be repaid. We lived in a nice community. The mortgage was to be paid. All he had to do was just go into the joint account and then just take the money out. And so he would give me these blank checks and he would just say, okay, just go ahead and endorse and I will just make the payments. And I would just blank check and I would just sign and sign and sign. Come to find out, after a while, things were not going as I thought that they should be going. He became withdrawn, and there were times he would come home and he would not speak to me. And I was saying, what's wrong? Because all I'm thinking about is having a marriage like the marriage my parents had. My parents were married for more than 50 years, and I just wanted a life like that. But he became withdrawn. And then one day I was driving along. I think I was going on an assignment for the television station where I worked. And I saw him in a vehicle at the service station, and there was a woman who was sitting in the passenger seat. And I said, "Ooh, I wonder who that woman is." So when he got home, I said, "Who was that woman?" He said, "Oh, it's someone from my office. I was giving a ride." But to make a long story short, he had an affair with that woman. And subsequently, he came home one night, and he just said to me, "I'm leaving." He just walked out of the house. And when that happened to me, Kathy, I cannot explain the feeling that I was experiencing at that time because
Hmm.
my whole life was wrapped up in this bubble of a marriage, loving this man, trusting him. And then here he was, walked out of my life. And
Hmm.
so that triggered the downward spiral because the day after he left, I had a housekeeper, and she came in and she said, "What's going on?" I said, my husband left. And she said to me, she said, "Miss Jenny, let me tell you the truth. It's good. Let him go." Because her name was Mrs. Martin. She said, "Mr. Martin and I have said he's not good enough for you," because apparently they knew things about him that I did not know.
Hmm.
So I went downstairs, sat there, opened up the newspaper. I don't know what I was looking for, but I know now it just had to be God. When I looked
Hmm.
in the classifieds, I saw "for sale by public auction, lot 80 Canal Drive, Garvey Mead." And I'm thinking, oh, this sounds familiar. That was my house. My house was up for auction. Tommy had not paid. He had not paid the bills, and he apparently had just, whatever letter had come from the mortgage company to me or to us, he had just taken it. But anyway, I almost lost that house, and creditors started coming in asking for money for the grocery mart, for this, for that, and that. He had not paid anything. And eventually, I had to go and take out a loan to consolidate everything, which amounted to $250,000. And I
And
did not see.
what year was that, Jennifer?
This was 1990, 1990.
$250,000 in 1990
In
was a lot
1990.
of money.
It's a lot of
But
money. It's a lot
yeah.
of money. And so it was left on me now to go and to repay this, because he just would not do anything. And he had, by this time now, apparently he had moved in with a woman. And I said to myself, what am I going to do? So I went to the manager of the television station and I asked him, I said, if I were to go to the United States for a year and get my master's and come back, would you allow me to come back? He said, no, 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 no. If you leave, you just keep on going. We don't want you to come back, because I figured in my mind, if I could come to the United States and earn some money, then it would multiply itself, because the ratio of the dollar was $1 at the time was about $5 Jamaican. So I'm thinking that if I were to get a job here, it would be multiplied and to be able to
Mhm.
pay off the debt. But it did not work out like that. It did not work out like that. So I ended up applying to Howard University because I thought that coming to school, getting the job, doing some things on the side, I could send the money back home. But when I got to Howard University, I did not realize that I could not work. I was not legally entitled to work because I just did not know about the laws of the United States. So I was stuck. I could not work, at least off campus. If there's anything that I could do, it would have to be on campus because I was on an F1 visa. And all I came to this country with was $96, a suitcase that I borrowed from my sister. I packed my clothes in it, and my son. Because when my ex husband left, my son was 1 year old. And by the
Mm.
time we got here, he had just turned 3. We came August 10th, 1991, and TJ turned 3 August 5th,
Mhm.
1991. So I came with him, and people have asked me, they said, why did you take your child with you? And I said, I couldn't leave him. He's my baby. He's my responsibility. So I took him with me. And when I got here, I ended up staying with a friend of a friend of a friend. And I was there for 2 weeks. The gentleman said, you can only stay here for a few weeks. I was there for about the first week when one night he opened the door and came in, and he was naked, naked. And it told me to move over on the bed. So, of course, I screamed. I grabbed my child, and then the following morning, I asked a Jamaican that I'd met for a ride to the campus, and I came to Howard University. There's a male dorm, and I got a friend to let me sleep on the floor in the male dorm, and I slept there for about 2 months. And
Mhm.
Kathy, I'm telling you, that dorm was full of roaches, because the reason why it was vacant was because the university was trying to do the pest control. And I slept on the floor. I asked the student who allowed me to stay in there for a pillow, and I put my
Mm.
son on the pillow, and we stayed in that place. So it was like
Mm.
for quite a while that we were there. But
Wow.
here is the odd thing about that. Even though I was sleeping on the floor, I was grateful. I was grateful that I was not on the street, because from upstairs where I was able to look down, I saw scores of people on the street in blankets, and it was getting close to winter, in blankets on the sidewalk. And so I said, it's bad, and I felt sorry for myself. Sometimes I still feel sorry for myself. It's bad, but I could have been on the streets. But my circumstances took a nosedive even further, because by this time my $96 was almost done. I used to go to the all you can eat section at the Blackburn Center on campus, and I would get the food there, like the little boxes of oatmeal and an orange and so on, put it in my backpack, and that's what I used to feed my baby. And I had no money now, just maybe about $1 left. And by this time now, winter had come. Winter had come, and I'd met a student. Her name is Michelle, and I'd asked her if she knew of anywhere that I could stay. And she said, "Oh, yes, I'll ask my mom." Her mother was a PhD student at Yale. She said, "I'll ask my mom if you can come by the house because my grandmother just died and we need somebody to be at the house with grandpa." So I went there, and the lady said to me, "Yes, you can stay in the room upstairs, but you have to pay me $150 a month." Kathy, $150 a month was like $1,500 because I didn't have a job and I didn't have I didn't have anything. So I didn't know how I was going to pay her. But I told her, "I cannot pay you this first month." And she said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to sell these paintings for me," because she was an artist. "And I will give you $3 for each painting that you sell. And then you can pay me the rent that way." And that was the agreement. But this Friday evening, there was a snowstorm and I had $1 left. And I could not take the bus to go back to Michelle's because that money was not enough to pay fare. And I sat in the room for the graduate assistants, and I just looked at my life that night, that evening rather, and I said, "What are you going to do?" And I had my son on my lap. And when the reality of my destitution was just staring me in the face. And that was the first time that I felt like, if I just ended this. And when I
Mm.
started to cry, I just felt a little thing on my cheek, and it was TJ. And he said to me, he said, Mommy, don't cry. I love you." Oh my God, Kathy, when he said that to me, I cried even more because I felt so sorry for him, sorry for me, sorry for the whole thing. And I felt like such an idiot, just such an idiot, giving my whole life over to this man, trusting him. And I'm not saying that trusting another person is not a good thing, but I never looked back in terms of, okay, double checking what he's doing, participate in the management of your finances. I did not do that. And so I sat there and I just wept. And then I heard a knock on the door. And I looked up and I said, "Oh my God, it has to be the security guard now. He's going to come and tell me that I have to leave." And the door opened, and there was a woman standing in the frame of the door. And she said, "I thought I heard somebody crying. Come, 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 come. What's wrong?" And she introduced herself to me. She was a professor in the department. And she said, "Come with me." And we walked down to her office. And she put Thomas on her lap. And I was sitting in the chair across from her. And she held my hands and she said, "Let's pray. Let's pray." And she prayed for me. She prayed for the child. She asked me if I needed anything. Of course, I didn't tell her anything about money. I just told her I just needed some things for him, for like his coat and all of that. And she said, "Okay." Then she said to me, "Do you know the Lord Jesus?" And Kathy, I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to hear that because I was at a place in my life where I said, if you are God, if you are God, why are you letting me endure this? Why am I suffering like this? And I didn't want to hear it. And she said, "Okay, okay, I'm going to give you my card." And she gave me a card that she said, "I'm a pastor of this church, and you can come whenever you want, maybe come on Sunday." And she gave us a ride home. But she explained this. She said she lives in Bethesda, which is some distance away from where Howard University is on Georgia Avenue. And she was about 2 blocks from her home in that snowstorm. And she said, something said to me, "Go back to the office because you're forgotten." And she's thinking, okay, maybe my keys, but I have my keys. And she said, it was like she was just hearing this voice, go back to the office. Then she said, you know what? This has to be God. And she
Hmm.
drove back there in the snowstorm. And that's when she found me. So she said to me, it wasn't anything that I had forgotten. It was you
Hmm.
that God remembered. It was you
Hmm.
that He remembered. And so that Sunday morning, Saturday, she brought a lot of stuff for TJ. And Sunday morning, I said to Brenda, because I felt the urge to go to church. And I had not been to church in years, because of course my life was, I thought, so good and I didn't need God. I did not need Him. For what? For what? But anyway, that Sunday morning, I got up and I said, I need to go to church. And Brenda took me to church with Michelle and my son. And when I got there, I was looking very bad. That's because the daughter had already told me how badly I looked because my clothes was from the thrift store. I bought my little coat for $1. And she said, Jennifer, don't you walk beside me when we're going anywhere because you look too bad. So I knew how I looked. And so I went and I sat at the back of the church. And when I sat at the back of the church, the pastor was preaching. And I heard it. I heard it. I heard a voice, and it says, come, all you who are heavy laden, and
Hmm.
I will give you rest. I will give you rest. And I knew that it was God. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. And so I got up. I got up from the back of the church and I walked. I walked all the way, and it was one of those mega churches, and I did not care how I looked. I didn't care that people were staring at me. And I went up there and I just knelt at the altar and I said to the Lord, I said, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Just forgive me and help me. I need you to help me because I've tried everything and you're the only one who can do this. So I want you to come into my heart, come into my life, just take it over. And that was a Sunday that I gave my life to Jesus Christ.
Hmm.
And nothing changed significantly that day. But the following morning, when I was on my way to Howard University, Michelle had given me a ride. I had the dollar that put in my pocket, and I was walking along by the restaurant close to the university, and I saw an old man, and the old man he had a cane in his hand, and he said to me, "Can you give me $1 to buy bread?" I said to God, I said, how are you going to ask me to give the $1 that I have? This all I have. And if I give my dollar, I have nothing to even buy something for TJ. And the Spirit of God said, no, give it to him. And I gave it to him and I walked up and I stood behind the utility pole to just watch him to see what he would do. And that little man, he hobbled into that restaurant. It's years now, but I'm still seeing him in my mind's eye. He hobbled into the restaurant and he came back out and he had the bread in his hand. And I knew that that man was hungry. And so I walked away and I said, God, I thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this. But now it's just you and me. You're going to have to take care of me. And I went up to the office. And when I got there, the administrative assistant, she said, are you the Jamaican woman with the baby? I said, yes. And she had an envelope which she extended to me between her forefinger and thumb. And when I looked at the postage, it was a Florida postage. And I was wondering who from Florida knows me. But when I opened it, it was from my godmother. My mother in Jamaica had told her that I was at Howard. And in it was a check for $200. $200. And Kathy, I cannot explain it. It's not something that you can explain. It's something that you have to experience. Either the following day or the day after, I was walking along the corridor in Howard trying to sell the paintings. But the $200, let me back up a little bit. The $200 that I got $150 out of that was for my rent, and $50 I could use for my fare from Capitol Hill, where I was living with a young lady and her mom, to school. So the day after, or the following day, I don't remember exactly how many days expired, but I was walking along the corridor with the paintings that Brenda had given me to sell. And then out of nowhere, I heard this huge, thunderous voice, and it was the voice of the dean. And oh my gosh, that man was about 6 feet 6 inches tall, and he had a bald head. And I'm looking at him now and thinking, he knows now that I have not paid my tuition. He's going to send me home. He's going to deport me to Jamaica. What am I going to do? Because I cannot go back, because the house, I have to try to work to get money to pay the mortgage and to pay off the arrears, because $17,000 worth of arrears plus the $250,000. And I didn't have the job at the television station. I was in a trap. I could not, I didn't know what I was going to do. So when I got into his office, he said, put those things away. Because I explained to him what I was trying to do. He said, put them away. And then he sort of calmed down a little bit. And then he said, the faculty and I have been just observing you and just observing how you have been taking care of this child. And we have decided that we are not going to buy stationery for the department. We are going to use that money and give you so you can pay your tuition. Because as a matter of fact, you're much better than a lot of men who have come here and have left their children, but you have this child with you. And he handed me $7,000, a check for $7,000. I cannot, Kathy, I cannot tell you how. I cannot, there are no words to explain. And then he said to me, you take that money up to the hill and make sure you pay it. And you can catch my phones. And I didn't know what he meant by catching my phones. He said, you can catch my phones and I'll give you $150 each month. That was my rent. So my book, when we talk about miracles, it documents how me, Jennifer Kindos, who once upon a time nobody could tell about the goodness of God, because I felt it was something hocus pocus, euphoric, up in the sky. I am deeply, deeply, deeply moved by what God has done for me in my life. And so it's a series of things. So I was able, the dean had said, we can only give you money for 2 semesters. So that meant for me, I had to finish my master's degree in that 1 year. And I worked night and day to finish that degree. And I got a job on campus at the restaurant. I was mopping the floor, wiping the windows, and all of that. And that was the money that I was able to use to send back to Jamaica. Of course, it took me about 12 years to pay off the debt. But when I finished the master's degree, I applied for a scholarship. This is a scholarship from the Organization of American States. And that was a long shot in the dark, because I still had to stay here and work because I still owed money back home in Jamaica. And I applied to the OAS, and they only give one scholarship, one single scholarship to someone from Latin America and the Caribbean who is actually outside of the country. Other people had applied for it. And then guess who got it? I
Mm.
got it. The OAS gave me, Jennifer Kindos. God gave me that scholarship. And the OAS gave me the scholarship to do my PhD. And there was a limit on the time, 2 years. I had to get it done in 2 years. And so in my story, it document how I was able to move out of the room where I lived with Michelle and her mom, and get an apartment in a very bad area in DC, because where I lived in that apartment, there were a lot of drug dealers. In fact, one night when I was up studying, because I worked, studied round the clock, night and day, because I had to finish this degree. I saw a man downstairs on the outside, and he was pulling up a window. And I thought that he was maybe the caretaker for the building, doing repairs. I'm thinking, but why would he be doing repairs at 3 something in the morning? Then I heard a woman scream. Next thing is that he had gone in there and raped the woman. As the next morning when we got up, there was blood everywhere on the front porch of where I live. It was a terrible, terrible thing. So it was not, we were not living in an environment that was conducive to good things. But I had to go through that time. And going through it, I knew that God would protect me. And so
Hmm.
everything that has led up to this point, it's just miracles. Even my first job, where I got my first job at Kentucky State, out of the blue, I got the job. And I got that job on a 1 year, because the government gives you 1 year to actually work, and then you have to leave the country. And I got that job for that 1 year. And before the 1 year ended, the president of the university and the vice president called me in and said, "We are going to apply to the Immigration and Naturalization Services for you to get your green card and stay here because you are such an effective employee."
Hmm.
And that's how I
Wow.
got my green card.
So tell me about becoming a citizen then. I mean, just as a little side note here, because obviously in our country right now we have just a lot of chatter and tension around immigration and your
Yes.
story of coming here and all the events that led up to your ability to become a productive, amazing person of influence in our country. How did all of that happen? How did you become a citizen?
For my citizen, well, once I got my green card, I got my green card in Kentucky, and the vice president for academic affairs, who had begun the process of doing that, he left Kentucky and he moved to North Carolina to a bigger position. And I had gone to Jamaica to spend Christmas with my mom. And when I came back, there was a message on my phone from him, and the message was, "We need you to leave Kentucky and come to North Carolina to work." Because I don't know, I guess they were pleased with my work ethic. So that's why they wanted me. Because he had just got this new job and he needed me in his administration. So he said, "Please come and work in North Carolina." And so that's how I was able to leave and come to North Carolina. And I worked in North Carolina for 5 years, becoming the dean as well. But for my citizenship, I think I had my green card for, I would say, maybe about 10 years or so. And then I thought about it because I had TJ, and TJ had to go to school, and I wanted him to make sure that everything would be fine for him. So I applied for my citizenship. And when I applied, they look at everything. They saw that I was never, Kathy, a burden to the state. Never. No, I don't do that. I've always paid my taxes. Always paid my taxes. I've always worked. I've never not worked. Because ever since I've been here, August 10th, 1991, I've always worked. And even now,
Yeah.
I'm 72 years of age, and people have said to me, "Oh, Dr. Kinders, when are you getting ready to retire?" I said, "Do I look like somebody who wants to get to retire anytime soon?" Because I work. That's what I do.
Right. Yes. So you went through the process. You came, you got your education. Tell us about your son. So he was just a little tyke when you came. How did he take all of this? I mean, he was right there with you with the cockroaches and with the cold, and tell me about that.
Yes, when I didn't know that Thomas didn't really know a lot about what was going on until he was a senior in college. We were in Jamaica visiting his grandmother, and I had a copy of the book because I'd written it, I think maybe from 2011. The copy of the book was in a back room on a desk. And apparently he saw it. So he said, "Oh, mommy, this is your book?" So I said, "Yes." And as you said, you just read it in one sitting. He closed the door and then he read it in one sitting. But I was surprised at his response because when he came back out of the room, I was on the bed and he
Mhm.
knelt at the foot of the bed and he was crying. He was crying and he said, "Mommy, I had no idea. I had no idea that you endured all of this." Because what I did, I tried to protect him. I tried to protect him. And even when we didn't have, it didn't appear as if we didn't have, because whatever I had, it was for him. And he was just a regular run of the mill kid. I tried to keep him in private school. As soon as I started to work, he went to Catholic schools and then he went to Cape
Mm.
Henry Collegiate, schools like that where I felt that he would have a solid education. But I also took him when he was a child, took him to the streets where the homeless people lived. And I asked them, the men, to talk to him. Because as a young black man growing up in the United States of America, I did not want
Mhm.
my son to become a statistic. I did not want him to just just fall on the wayside. I didn't want him to get involved with drugs and all of the bad things. And so I said, let me go to the source. Let me talk to these people who have experienced it. And you know what they would tell him? They said, look, listen to your mother. Listen to your mother. Because if we had somebody like your mother to talk to us, we wouldn't be here right now. And so that's how I tried to protect him. And he has done very well for himself. He went to UMS as well, but he graduated with a degree in marketing. And then he went to law school. Yay, law school. So he's a lawyer. And I remember breaking all protocol when I went to his law school graduation. And Kathy, you know how graduations are supposed to be, you have to be respectful, you have to remember the
Mm.
ceremony. I sat there up in the top of the wherever we had it, and
Yeah.
I saw my son walking down with everybody else with his regalia with the 3 bars on the sleeves
Right.
as a Juris Doctor. And I screamed from my belly. I screamed from my belly. I, people were looking at me like I'm crazy, but they had no clue where we were coming from.
Yeah.
This is what I worked for. This is what I worked for.
Wow.
So for my kid to grow up to be somebody in this society.
Hmm. That's amazing. Here, just to summarize our story today, first of all, again, those of you that would love to read her book, and her son sat down and read the whole thing. I did the same thing. Miracles in the Valley, Out of Darkness into Marvelous Light. I highly recommend it. And what I just wanted to say, just to kind of summarize, the courage that it takes, the stamina, the fortitude, and the faith, all of these coming together is, I mean, this is a beautiful story of conquering difficulty, but not conquering it by yourself. The
Yes,
rescue, that's truly a rescue, honestly. When you were telling me about your story when we were working together, and I will tell you this. Okay, financial planning, right? So we help women retire. It's not about numbers. It isn't
yes,
about numbers. It's about the continuation
yes,
of your life. Your life
right,
is huge and big and
yes.
meaningful. And when you move into a phase of life when you're approaching retirement, for many people, for many women, they have this money that they've saved and they just want their life to continue. They want things to continue down the track and they don't really know how to make
Yes,
that happen. And that's the privilege that
Right.
we have at Theia Financial, is to meet people like you that have a, a massive story. You're not nearly done contributing to this world. So what I want to do is, I know our time is running short here, but I want to tell you that we're delighted to be able to introduce Jennifer to you. And I will tell you, it's a privilege for me to have the acquaintance. And Jennifer, any final words for our audience today?
Yes, I just want to, well, first of all, thank you so much, Kathy, for giving me this platform. But I just want to encourage your listeners that no matter what it is that they're going through, no matter what it is, to find this source in them. For me, that source is Christ. And trust, believe, don't fall off the cliff, because you have to stand your ground and fight and look up, keep looking up. Just keep looking up and believing that tomorrow is going to be much better. So find something that you believe in, and have that as a source in you, because you can't fight
Mhm.
this life alone. It's impossible. It's impossible. And do
Mm.
not give up on yourself.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's such a pleasure. And again, if you'll look at the bottom of the screen, you'll be able to purchase Jennifer's book. We'll continue to stay in touch and work towards this future that you are, this fruitful
Yes.
future for yourself, right? So, okay. All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay. All right. Bye bye.